Hi, everyone. I'm Frost. Today, I would like to talk about data-driven strategies, especially on how to pick the right data and make our business decisions with the unbiased data. We all heard about the term data-driven strategies a lot. Why is it important? It's because we have so many different kinds of users who generate tons of interactions with our products and platforms that we want to hear them out, we want to understand them, and therefore to optimize their user experiences. Therefore, we collect tons of data from their activities. And sometimes we just chose some representative data user groups to represent our entire user base. We may use different segmentations, such as time segments, all the users who have interacted with our product within the last 30 days. It can be geo-based, all the users from the United States, or just all the users with user ID ends with 5. However, because our users are so different and non-homogeneous, a lot of times the random chosen user groups only represented a specific type of users in our entire users. So how do we make sure we actually address our users with the right data that represents what they want? We all know it's really impossible to use all the data since day one our product launched and from all the users. Not only it takes forever to process, tons of engineering resources to clean up the data. A lot of the features are not really comparable since day one to now after years of optimization. And after we update our data models and finally change our user-facing features, we already lost tons of time premium to reflect on what users really want. And because how slow it is, it's also really not possible to form a continuous feedback loop to optimize the user experiences. So what we want to do is still to find all these anchor points, or in other words, the representative data points that forms a path to our goal, or to answer our questions, like why do users churn? Why do users buy more? How do we ace the holiday sales? And it will look like this. With the right data point sets, we can have much faster feedback loop to our data models that we can use to change the user-facing features. And because it's fast enough, we can form a continuous feedback loop that continuously optimizes the user experiences. But how do we choose the data points? We want to make sure we get all the 3 points right. One is efficiency. We want to invest the right amount of engineering power with the right amount of time processing it. We make sure the feedback speed is reasonable. We don't want to speed weeks or months. And the most importantly, we want to make sure the accuracy. So how do we choose it? There are so many candidates in a fast amount of data that we're empowered by. And there are so many different ways to look at the candidates to form different paths to our goal. I'll talk about several different ways. Number one is the funnel analysis. In a growth term, basically that means in a user journey, we identify from the beginning to the user enter specific experience to the end, which is our goal, and what are the key actions that users interact with our platform. So here, I'll use example. If we are to optimize our checkout process, the top of the funnel would be the moment when user click on checkout. And the bottom of the funnel would be the user finish the checkout process, or in other words, they complete the order. And all the key actions in between can be different pages users go through, can be different key actions such as users enter their shipping address, users choose the payment method, or users try to apply their coupon codes. And we see where the gaps are to decide what are the numbers we need to track and where are the opportunities we can optimize for. So if you find out the biggest drop point is users try to apply the coupon code and end up dropping it, maybe you can think about, actually many cases I found out is use a plural in your coupon code, and users just forgot to put the ace, they couldn't apply it, and they just abandon the cart because they feel they don't get the 10% off that they want. So we keep all the numbers to monitor the checkout conversion process health and see where are the opportunities. The other way that is really popular now is completely mathematical. That basically we get an array of numbers as input, and we try to predict an array of numbers as a desired output. So with this method, it doesn't really need any specific domain expertise that we decide what exactly, like 5 numbers we try to analyze in a funnel analysis. But we try to put a little bit more attributes in and let the machine learning model to decide what is relevant. So for example, in the checkout process, again, we will put in even more, such as sometimes users just defocus their input box in the zip code. Sometimes they block the pop-out box in the payment method. Sometimes can even be the session length. And with this amazing black box that only your most senior machine learning engineers need to know how it works, everyone can use it and find out what are the correlated data points. And sometimes it helps you to identify the metrics you would have never thought about that matters. For example, at one point I found out one of the relevant data point was when users focus and unfocus their name field a lot. Because in certain languages, the name tokenization is completely different from when we are using Roman characters. So for example, for a Japanese user, they don't really have a space between their first name and last name. So they just keep seeing, oh, your name format is wrong, but they don't know what really happened. So they just focus, unfocus, try to fix it. So from there, we realized, OK, there is something that really errored out, and we need to fix. However, while it's magical, it is almost too magical that we need to ensure that we always look at it from a product point of view and a user journey of view to know if the numbers are actually really relevant and as a causation, not just coincident or with really sure correlation. I'll give 2 examples I personally encountered. One is one day I found out over a period of time, when the push notification click-through rate goes up, the revenue actually went down. It sounds extremely suspicious and kind of weird because that means if I just completely stop sending push notifications, the revenue will go infinite and then my job will be done. How would that be possible? Should we really try to optimize sending less so our revenue can go up as our top KPI? Because it's so obviously wrong, we look closer into it and why it happened. It's actually when Apple launched the feature that if users don't interact with your app for a while, it automatically deletes your app or offload your app from the user's phone. So as a result, Apple basically cleans up your recipient list for you, that only the engaged users can still receive your push notifications. So as a result, the push notification click-through rate goes up. But because the apps actually got offloaded and deleted from users' phones, the revenue went down. So in this case, not only push notification click-through rate is not the causation of the revenue change, I would say it's an extremely secondary correlation because the direct correlation is actually this particular Apple feature. Another example is once we did an A/B experiment for whether email marketing is helpful at all. So in the control group, we sent no emails. And in the show group, we sent a lot of interesting marketing emails. And as a result, surprisingly, we found out the revenue per active user is actually higher when we actually send no emails at all. Well, again, it sounds quite interesting because that means my job will be, let me just kill our email marketing program, and we're done here. But as you can see here already, you find out the number of active users are a little bit different. Let's take a little bit closer. So what really happens is when we have 2 groups of users, and when we send more emails to this group of users in a show group, we actually bring back more active users, and therefore the number of active users actually went up a lot, and the total revenue also went up. But because When we just do the division between revenue and active user, it looks lower. However, it's still the desired group we actually want to keep. The most scary thing is sometimes in our A/B testing tools, you only see the last column, and it may not be as obvious that is misleading. So these two examples are absolutely ridiculous. We immediately know something's wrong, but in our day-to-day basis, there are a lot of numbers that can look right at first glance. So how do we know if the data are biased? First of all, let's always look at the top-line matrix. Because when we look at ratios, what assumptions we are making is the target group stays the same, either the size, the engagement, or the feature of the users, which sometimes, actually a lot of times, are not true. So in the push notification sense, if we just look at the total push notification clicks, we'll see a positive correlation. When there are more clicks, the revenue is actually higher. Another example we always encounter is we run so many A/B experiments, and it all shows very strong growth in our revenue. Plus 10% here, plus 5% here. But when we ship them all, we find out our top-line revenue doesn't really increase that much. And we ask us why, because the top-line revenue is really what matters. Well, it can be some of the experiments are not independent statistically. So for example, if we want to use the influencer marketing content in our email program as experiment A, that increased a lot of user engagement. And experiment B, we show all the pop-ups of our influencer images in our app independently. Both of them are great. But when we ship both of them, it becomes creative fatigue. Or in other words, users are so tired of seeing exactly the same image again, again, and again. And it may cause actually negative user engagement impact. And scarily, a lot of times, these two experiments are done by different teams. And they just ship independently, and they never know the other thing is going on. And no one is looking at the top-line revenue. So when we are shipping experiments, we always look at, does the KPI we try to optimize really goes up after we ship it? Number 3, let's not use overly fancy metric that when we first look at it, we don't really know what it means. So what does user engagement score mean? It can be more users get activated from acquisition campaigns. It can be more users retained. It can also be each user actually spend more amount of money over the last 30 days. When the person who defined the metrics at first place, it must be a really good reason why he or she defined it. But over time, when new people come into a team, or even the initial people who use these metrics, may forget or lose the grasp of intuition. What does that mean when it goes from 75 to 50? If it takes time for certain experts of your company to dig what even that means, maybe this metric is too fancy. We want some metric that is very intuitive and very direct, such as the total revenue of email marketing campaign. When it went down from 5 million to 4.5, you immediately know what's the impact of this to your business revenue. And you also know what metrics to look at, what is wrong, and what can we improve right there. In other words, there should be no dark magic of metrics. If a metric needs one full page of wiki to explain what it means, trust me, someone will misread it. Some people, including myself sometimes, were too lazy to read it. And we can forget about it. We may assume it means something else from our previous jobs or from some blog posts we have read before. So let's not add extra work for ourselves. Also, last but not least, when we put all the metrics in our dashboard to monitor, like we talked about earlier, when we ship all these A/B experiments to see if it keeps delivering for the top-line KPIs, we want to make sure that we put only the relevant metrics. So for this example, if we were to look at what's the performance for our user acquisition, we definitely want to know the ROI of our ad campaigns. We also want to know what's the sign-up rate of different user groups. But do we really need to know what's the review rate of the users who just sign up? Maybe it's extremely relevant for specific kind of products and platforms. But before we decide that it's super important, let's not put metrics on the dashboard just because it's easy to get. And the more is actually not better, sometimes worse. Because if you don't have enough time to look at each metrics at least once a day, you can just imagine as they don't exist because you don't have time to read them. So to sum up all we said, we do want to hear users through data and try to optimize as much as the user experience possible while we try to push in the data into a machine learning model so we make sure that we have all the metrics that we may not think about personally to be considered. But at the same time, when the results are shown, we also want to make sure we can understand the results both in the product way or from a user journey perspective. And most importantly, we continuously monitor all the top-line KPIs instead of just looking at them once and decide to ship it, because sometimes it can be misleading. Thank you so much for hearing. And let's talk more if you want to talk about data-driven strategies. Thanks.